Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reuters Events webinar. We're seeing a few of you join. It takes a moment for everyone to fully enter the system. So while we are waiting for everyone to join, I'd love to hear who's in the audience. So, are you, what part of the marketing function do you sit in? Where are you dialing in from? Tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat. We want this to be a super interactive conversation, so please do message in. Looks like we've got a few more people joining now. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of the Reuters Events webinar series. Today's discussion is going to be based around the central theme of future-proofing your digital advertising strategy with better targeting, delivering better results. But what about tomorrow? So I'd like to extend a thank you to you all for joining us today, whether that is with us live now or for those who are tuned into a recorded session. We're really excited to have you all listening into this conversation. While we wait for those who are still joining the webinar, I will go over a few bits of housekeeping so that we can keep things running smoothly. But I've just launched a poll. So have a look at that. How familiar are you with programmatic? Are you an industry expert? Are you knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, or not familiar with it at all? So let us know how experienced you are in the area of programmatic. And while we do that, I will introduce our wonderful panel of speakers. Really excited to have everyone here, such a diverse array of experience and industry as well. So we have Erin Condon, the Vice President of Front Store and Omnichannel Marketing for CVS Health, Jeff Nienbar, the Senior Director of Global Audience Ads at Microsoft, Jay Picanata, the Director of E-commerce for General Mills, and Brian Burt, the VP of Marketing for StackAdapt. Thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to hear your insights. And finally, I would like to introduce a good friend of Reuters Events, Nicholas Zeisler, who will be moderating the discussion. Nick is an all-round marketing and customer experience expert. Over the past few years, he has bopped between independent consulting, the US Air Force, and HP, most recently as the Director of Customer Experience. We're very excited to have you involved, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Nick. I'm going to launch the poll results and then hand it over. We do have another poll to come, but we'll have a look at these results first. Over to you, Nick.
All right, thanks, Jazz. Good to be here again. I'm not sure where I'll see these results, but I'm excited too. All right. Here they are. Okay, what we've got here is what I'm seeing is that there's some knowledge out there about programmatic. One out of you is an industry expert. To me, it's just a word. I'm looking forward to talking with the experts here and learning more about that and about what it is, as well as more generally talking through the to the panelists here about moving forward with marketing in the future. Jazz, if what we could do is just put up the second poll. Here we go. Here are some DSPs, and I invite you all to take a look at this poll. Let us know what who you've heard of. Feel free to choose as many as you like there. And in the meantime, I think we're going to kick off into some of the questions here, and then we'll get to the results of that poll, Chaz. If you hold off on just a minute on releasing those results, and we'll get right into that in just a few minutes. But for what it's worth, let's jump in and let's start with our questions. And Erin, I want to start with you over at CVS. There, we're about to enter a new world with Google and Apple and everything, crushing down on the cookies and so forth. Cookies used to be great. Now they're not so great. We're moving into a new place where it's hard to get this information. Now, CVS, though, has an approach that might be different and more unique about that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're approaching that and what you've got going on there?
Yeah, I would say as a marketing industry for the last several years, all of us have been really chasing the tech and precision targeting, right? And trying to be as efficient as possible. So you've seen in general moves out of mass reach channels and into more precision targeted programmatic channels. And that's good. At the end of the day, marketing is a science and an art, always has been and will continue to be. So when you think about the reach and relevance equation, I actually am seeing this as an opportunity for us to shift the pendulum back a bit to relevance again, and a call to action to do that. Within CVS, we've had the benefit of having a long-standing extra care loyalty program where we have deep engagement with our customers, and we've earned that trust over time. So for us, we have high fidelity first party data, which is a big piece of the equation, right? The identity graph, and we have engagement in owned and operated channels like email and direct mail and SMS, and those are growing. What we're very conscious of is we still have work to do to provide that relevant content outside of those properties. But we're also conscious of the fact that all of the other marketers, whether CPGs, retailers, publishers, other industries, they're all building their first party data sets right now because of this as well. And so there'll be more competition with the consumer's attention in channels like email and offsite partnerships. So we're very conscious of, again, making sure that we're functionally and emotionally resonating with the consumer and not just over swinging the pendulum on precision reach.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're leaning into, Aaron, is a deliberate approach to it, right? Rather than just, we're collecting a whole bunch of stuff there. One of the industries you mentioned there was CPG. Speaking of, Jay, tell us your thoughts on that. How are you at General Mills approaching this?
Yeah, so we like to use the term connected commerce, and absolutely to Aaron's point, we're working on our first party data strategy, and I'll probably touch on that a touch later. But how I talk about connected commerce is we have to get a distinct understanding of consumer journeys and then realize that every part of that journey is shoppable. Tomorrow, you'll be able to touch anything on the street and you probably can get it delivered to your house. So that is where we're kind of moving towards. And I'd say how we're getting after that, it starts with that mindset. It starts with that strategy, of course, but then from an org design, a capability tools, et cetera, you have to make some different choices on that strategy. And so we are really now embedding teams in the businesses to get after connected commerce and performance marketing. We've historically done that at a central level and done test and learns and tried to then socialize, but it really needs to live in the business team in order to do that. And so that's the org structure design we're putting there. And then the capabilities team, and Aaron did a really nice job of highlighting this, the tech enablement behind all of this is so different than what we are used to doing. It is so, in what we're talking about with programmatic, it is such a heavy lift on that side that if we're going to show up brilliantly in the marketplace, we need to have resources and really business leader support of our tech more so than we've had in the past. And I use this example with our CMO yesterday. When I want a new package design on the shelf, I don't call logistics and figure out the truck lines. When I want a new package design customized for Kroger on their digital shelf, I kind of do. I need to figure out the piping, and that's a new muscle for us to really kind of work through.
Yeah, Jay, I think you speak to an overall general business philosophy that's been successful that I've found, which is building your structure of your organization. You'd alluded to this, to represent and reflect what it is you're trying to get done, rather than just that's your job, that's your niche, right? Sure. And it makes it so much easier to get the entire organization on board and moving in the same direction if it's built in the first place, with that endpoint in mind. And I do want to talk about connected commerce, and definitely going to come back and chat a bit more about that, Jay, too. Let's take a pause here, and Jazz, if you could put up the results now of poll 2, because I want to use that to introduce the next member of our panel here. We have got a lot of recognition of Google. Wow, somehow Google has gotten out there. I wonder how it is that happened, but we've got a a very close second in recognition, would you say, Brian, as StackAdapt? And I want to use that as an opportunity to introduce Brian Birch, who is the VP there of marketing at StackAdapt. Brian, why don't you take off from this question as well about what's coming up and what's new and what's different and how we need to react differently.
Sure, thanks, Z. So I've been lucky enough for the last 30 years to be a marketer leading teams in the high tech space. And in fact, that's how I discovered StackAdapt. It delivered fantastic results for my team and I when I was at Cisco, which is part of the reason why when the opportunity was presented to join StackAdapt, I really jumped at it. What we found was that as long as and this is kind of answering a question from the audience, Taran's question, what we found was as long as we were super clear about our audience, who we were trying to reach, and what we were trying to tell them, that programmatic platforms served an unbelievable purpose to sort of broker the open internet and give us the opportunity through a variety of different targeting methodologies and a variety of different channels to be able to meet that audience with that appropriate message. StackAdapt was launched about 7 years ago now, with artificial intelligence and machine learning sort of built into the platform itself. So it makes 2.5 million decisions every second to make sure that clients, either brands like we have today or agencies, get this really reliable delivery, highly effective delivery at the moment of truth when someone is researching or looking for or in the context of potentially looking for brands or services or products, and being able to provide them with the information they're looking for has really been a big boon to the industry, and we're pleased to be part of it.
Yeah, that's great, Brian. It's so important to have technologically advanced partners to navigate this new world and the world that's not even here just yet. And I want to come back to you and learn a little bit more about StackAdapt and what it does on behalf of and in teaming with their clients. We want to bring Jeff in here, Jeff Nienaber at Microsoft there. We all know Microsoft. It's a brand that everybody's familiar with. What's your perspective on the bigger picture of privacy regulation as we move kind of into this new world as it pertains specifically to marketing?
Yeah, thanks, Z. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's a great question. I think if we step back and we look at sort of what's happened in the last 5-10 years in digital, we've seen a lot of the core capabilities of the web being used in ways that are extremely innovative, that have brought about a bunch of liquidity, a bunch of value, but haven't necessarily brought the average human or consumer, or what we would call user, into the center of the economics, into the center of the ecosystem or the decision-making process. So when we think about the next 25 years, for it to continue to scale, for us to continue to grow new monetization models and drive new value for marketers and publishers, we do need to pivot, and we need to put the consumer, the human being, at the center. Our principal approach is to focus on actual benefits for human beings, and then control and transparency, right? Just basic fundamental capabilities that you want when you have digital experiences, especially when they're powered by data or by identity. Those things that are very personal. When the web was first architected, there wasn't a comprehension of how important those things were going to become to our economy. And so this is an opportunity in the ecosystem to pause and to think about, okay, well, what's going to future-proof us for the next 25 years? And we believe those principles are super important. And I think you can see it globally across lots of different bodies of legislation and regulation. We think it's very disruptive. Obviously, the liquidity and the capabilities brought about by third-party cookies and mobile ad IDs is tremendously powerful. But in order to sort of embrace the zeitgeist and where many different sovereign nations are leading us when it comes to regulation, we need to put consumers back in the center, right? We need to drive real change. And that will bring trust that hasn't existed. Of course, there's pain, but that trust will bring about another wave of innovation and opportunity, because then the consumer is actually at the center of it, and they're controlling and telling us where to go and where to innovate. So that's how we think about it from a principal perspective.
Yeah, Jeff, I love that perspective. And this is one of the things that I say a lot when it comes to these highly regulated industries. We don't necessarily have one of those represented on this panel here, but I always love to have these webinars where we got somebody from insurance or somebody from healthcare. And I know Aaron, part of CVS is healthcare and clinics as well. But it's those brands that play in those industries and fields that are so highly regulated, banking and credit and so forth. Those that really embrace, Jeff, what you're talking about, which is putting the customer at the center of that break away from the excuse making. Hey, well, we're highly regulated. This is how it's going to have to be. Sorry, we're a bank, and this is how it's going to have to be. Making things easier, making things personalized, making things more customer centric. Those brands that do that within those industries just take off and differentiate themselves so well. Aaron, I did mention you're nodding along. What, you have something to add to that as well?
Yeah, no, I would just say agree. And again, I go back to earning the consumer and the customer's trust becomes more important than ever, because when you do deliver, functional value to them, that's clear, in the healthcare space, retail space, or any space, then they will give you the permission and want more of that one-to-one communication, but it has to be authentic. And the data and tech don't solve authenticity alone.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also say that that regulation, I'll use the little air quotes here, that regulation doesn't necessarily always come from governments. I mean, Jeff used the SAT word of the zeitgeist, and we're kind of living in this world now where whether there's regulation coming down or not, that privacy and that securing of data is become important to consumers, just period, whether or not there's a new rule or not. Jay, I wonder if you have thoughts on this as well. I mean, far removed from things like highly regulated HIPAA requirements and so forth, still you're dealing with people who are engaging with your brands on a relatively transactional way. Well, they don't want to just leave all their data out there for a cereal company to grab a hold of it. So you've got to respect that, right? So how are you kind of threading that needle as well?
I think it's a great commentary about putting the consumer first, right? And the programs, I'll give a few examples that we have built to, yes, get after some first party understanding, and yes, to get after an ability to communicate in a personalized way as a tangential benefit of them, but are most importantly centered around how do we deliver a better consumer experience. And I'll highlight just kind of two. So we have a pet company called Blue Buffalo that is part of General Mills, and Blue Buffalo was had a direct presence in store with something they used to call their pet detectives, and it was essentially really, really well-trained people in a store environment that can help guide on when you buy a new pup, or when you get a new puppy and you are trying to get what food is best, what toys are best, how do I counsel you, or you have illness, what type of vet situation should you be looking at, and how just really be that expert resource. And it just so happened we were moving towards a digital era anyway, but then COVID hit. We are no longer in stores. We are no longer having this one-to-one relationship, which was a very educational and trusted relationship with these pet detectives. And so how do we digitize that experience, and how do we bring a solution that is still very consumer first in terms of an experience? We built an app called Buddies, but its intent is much more than selling product. Its intent is be that pet detective, that resource for a consumer. And it was sent on that consumer first mentality. Now, yes, one-to-one relationship. Yes, we get some data out of that. Yes, there is some other benefits that are going to allow us to kind of market differently in the future, but it had to center around that experience. Similarly, I know we talked about this one last time, Z, but we have a Box Tops platform. For 25 years, Box Tops for Education has been run by clipping off cardboard and mailing it into us. A lot of nostalgia there, a lot of interesting. We've given just shy of $1 billion to schools in the last 25 years. So it's worked, but that's not really how consumers interact with brands anymore. And it's not that convenient. So it started with we need to be bringing a digital solution to people so they can still give to their schools. They can still have this program run, but we're not beholden to the US postal system in the way that we have been. And so that's another example where it started with that consumer experience. And yes, there's some of this first party benefit that we're going to have as a result, but it has to be centered around what Jeff and Aaron were talking about.
Yeah. And, Jay, you talk about, I think what you're alluding to here is jobs to be done too. We get so caught up in how we do what we do. We lose track of what our customers are trying to accomplish and achieve in the first place, where if we focus on that, then we can be really creative and develop new ways of doing it, so that I don't have to include my self-addressed stamped envelope in the package with all my box tops. I want to get back to Brian now. I want to talk more about StackAdapt, because I see you nodding and chomping at the bit to share not only your experience. You alluded to this before, that you brought in StackAdapt as a client yourself, so it's easy to sell you on it as being part of the leadership team where you are now. But I also want to hear from you a little bit about what StackAdapt does for your clients, for your customers, how you help them make these connections as well.
Sure. What I learned as a client before joining the company was that in the context of a potential prospect's life on the internet, or in the case of some of the things StackAdapt can do at a specific event, they're very open. They're anxious to be delivered information that is relevant or helpful to the process they're undertaking. So, one of our more popular forms of communication on our platform is called native advertising, where we place ads that are highly relevant to the content within the content itself, so that people who read an ad perceive it to be beneficial because it's answering questions or helping them with whatever it is they're researching or looking through. Another example, when I was at Cisco, we did a geo-targeting event. We actually drew the latitude and longitude of the event hall where a big thing called Cisco Live was being held. And therefore, StackAdapt helped us launch a campaign that reached everybody in that hall. And the only context of people in that hall for those 4 days was either they were a Cisco employee trying to help customers understand something Cisco had to offer, a Cisco partner trying to build or add on or add value to whatever Cisco was launching, or like us, a business unit at Cisco that was trying to bring something new to the market that we thought would help solve problems, do jobs for our enterprise customers. So in the context of what those people were there to do, that campaign was welcome. It landed with great authority because it was helpful to them as they were planning what they were going to do at that event. And we got extreme performance. We got insane rates of completion of videos and overachieved our goal by a large measure. And, it just kind of opened my eyes to what a platform like StackAdapt can do, not just in native, like I mentioned, or geo-targeted campaigns, but now connected television, streamed audio like podcasts and Spotify. There's a lot of ways now that advertisers can place digital ads where previously the analog was the dominant provider. While we were all sheltered in place, kind of digital continued to eat a lot of those traditional forms of advertising. So it gives us more ability to help clients place ads that are relevant at the right time in the right place.
Yeah, and Brian, that relevance that you talk about, isn't it amazing how much more impactful your marketing can be if you're actually speaking with rather than just talking to your customers and potential customers? Jeff, I see you nodding along there as well, right? I mean, isn't the answer, whatever vehicle and whatever tools you're using to do it, if you're not actually listening to and conversing with your customers, then you're just blaring it out and you're not getting through, right?
Yeah. One of the state-of-the-art mechanisms we offer again to clients is contextual-based communication. So instead of relying on the behavioral targeting, some of the data that, is challenged by some of the changes that are happening in privacy, and we're very respectful as a company and a platform of the privacy of the individual. But contextual advertising determines what the phrases are that are actually in use on the page, and make sure that an ad that would be relevant to those contextual phrases is what gets placed there. So again, it becomes part of the content that helps an individual who's on that page for some specific reason, whether it be entertainment or because they're searching for something that they're interested in buying or learning more about. Being able to understand that context on the open internet, crazy number of choices being made every second, as I mentioned, and be able to deliver that relevant content that just, it doesn't seem like privacy is being violated or anything's being done. No data is being captured. It's all about what's happening on the page and why you're attracted to it in the first place.
Yeah, Jeff, what were you going to say about this a minute ago as well there?
Yeah, thanks. No, I agree with Brian. I think just circling back to Aaron's point of view earlier when it comes to first party relationships, I think you're absolutely right in that having that dialogue is critical. We don't want to see the change that's happening now as a dissolving of that one-to-one opportunity. There's still a tremendous personalization component. Technologies like within the RTB space, the DSPs that exist, StackAdapt, et cetera, and have the ability to do that at scale. The difference now is just its permission. There isn't this passive tracking capability that's borderline creepy surveillance. It's real one-to-one engagement. And I think where Aaron's headed is something that all marketers can learn from. Invest in that. You have the right to build new things, new value, and new opportunity with customers because they invite you to do it. Super exciting part of the changes we're in.
Yeah, and Aaron, in your line of work, your customers are necessarily sharing certain information in order to be better served by in the ways you do, not just in the clinical experiences, but also in the retail, right?
Absolutely. And we've had some great opportunities and learnings this year, right? So to the point of a highly regulated industry, we've earned the customer and patient's trust that if they're giving us information to schedule their COVID vaccine, that information doesn't go anywhere else, right? And that is for a very specific purpose and intent. But we enable capabilities like allowing you to easily access your vaccine record because you're giving us that information. And so being clear and authentic about when you're asking for information and how it's going to be used is piece number one. And then I will go back also to what Jeff said that I completely agree with, and putting the customer first, because it's real learning for us, right? So we have, and we've all been guilty of it as marketers, right? Pushing out content that works for us, right? Buy this, do that, try this thing. And when everything shut down last year, we realized within our own communication channels, in particular, our digital communication channels, we have to do something else. We can't do that right now. And we need to keep customers engaged. So we introduced new content series. Two examples are, CVS Cares and Health at Home, where we started providing information on things to do with your family to stay busy and healthy recipes. And we found the unintended positive consequence of, wow, our engagement rates actually went up with some of our digital channels as a result of infusing some of that content that we hadn't been before. And it was a great reminder that, gosh, are we always putting the customer first and giving her something that, either saves her time, saves money, or makes her feel more educated and rewarded?
And it's all that personal understanding and respect for what they're trying to accomplish that helps drive all of that, rather than, like we were saying, just blasting out, hey, here's what we're all about, here's what you're trying to do. Awesome. Kind of along those lines, but I also want to hit a little tangentially here a little bit, because Jay, you've got a question coming in from the Q&A, and I invite those who are in attendance to add that. And I want to bring this in along with a question that I had for you about that connected commerce we were talking about earlier in the discussion. How are you keeping your customers engaged when there's all this store brand, there's the generic, there's the no name, but there's also this artisan alternatives, as Brad is calling it in his question. I had the Cheerios cinnamon crunch this morning for breakfast, so you've got me hooked. And the dog, those of you watching, the panel met my dog earlier before, and she's on the Blue Buffalo, so you've got us for sure. But how are you standing out, and how does that tie in with the concept of the connected commerce that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, a couple of comments there, and one I'll start with. It's a little also tangential, but back to what Aaron and Jeff were highlighting.
Sure.
This is also iterative, right? And so, you can think as a marketer, all of the information I would love to have about consumers and put that on a list and start to try to tackle it. But there's no right to own that information. And so it's, I can probably get your email so I can send you a recipe content that's personalized to you. And then if that's quality, well, I can probably start the meal plan for you and give me some more information about your schedule. And if that delivers a benefit to you, well, now I can start to ask more and more things about your needs, your ages of your kids, the whatever, to try to continue to hone and personalize even further. But you have to earn that right as you go and think through, what is needed to start that conversation versus what is needed to improve it, and versus what is needed to obviously drive that solution. And I start there, Z, not because I'm trying to avoid your question, but it's actually the start of your question, right? It is the how do we stand out? Well, one is mass brands still have a role. We still have to lead with the purpose of the brand and really the purpose and pursuit of what we are trying to accomplish as a big organization. I firmly believe, you talk about artisan, you talk about, smaller companies that have different abilities to do good. We firmly believe that the amount of good our organization can do because of the scale that we have is differential. The idea of regenerative agriculture from a company like us versus a small company that does it independently on one farm is very, very different. The impact is millions of acreage, not hundreds of acreage. And so we do believe that starting with that purpose of each brand and starting with what they are trying to do and be good in the world is still a very powerful way to defend against private label, is still a very powerful way to lead against small artisanal brands. But then it gets to kind of how I started this commentary from our end. It is how do we build now intimate and earned relationships with people over time to really drive that performance.
Yeah. So how does that tie in with those shoppable moments, Jay, in that connected commerce view? I mean, obviously that's a great strategic approach, right? And what a good perspective, especially from a marketing, the marketing aspect of it. But how are you turning those into these shoppable moments that you're talking about?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I mean, it's again, it starts with that handhold with CMI and that true intimate understanding of a journey that shoppers are going down. And journeys start with triggers. So I liked use the pet example I had earlier. A new puppy purchase is a important trigger, or a health message on cholesterol is an important trigger that then we need to be personalizing message in a contextual way, like the team was talking about, against that, right? We are able to use DSPs like we are describing here and go, hey, this group of audience likely just got, because of what they're searching on, just got a cholesterol message at home, right? They just learned that they're like me, they're eating too much at COVID and they have high cholesterol. Okay, that's a trigger moment that we can start to inject personalization into, not in a way like I know it's Uzi and you have this message, but in a way that's very contextually relevant and we understand those journeys. Now that personalization message becomes very shoppable. That's all around Cheerios and the heart health benefit it provides versus Cheerios first finger food versus Cheerios cinnamon crunch news that is all about taste and what you described. And so that is how we are really trying to take that connected journey, talk about every point being shoppable and make sure that it's contextually.
Yeah. Brian, at StackAdapt, how is this ringing true for you as well? And how are you leveraging these approaches for, on behalf of your clients and their brands?
Sure. So the sophistication of both behavioral methods and contextual methods of targeting has become so good that we could help, or any number of platforms could help Jay place his cholesterol related message, not when someone's planning a vacation, but when they're looking into a fitness product, or when they're thinking about their kids' health, or when they're, getting tips about, recovering from the sedate lifestyle that we tended to adopt during COVID. There are just all sorts of opportunities in content on the internet across a broad range of locations and pages that cholesterol message might be welcomed rather than resisted. And that's what we specialize in, finding that way to match what someone is interested in with the right message that will activate what they want to do at that time.
Yeah, not just resisted, Brian, but sometimes missed altogether, right? If you put it in the wrong place and somebody's not, okay, well, I don't know why this is popping up here, right?
Yeah. Well, and we've come so far that we have so many tools. It's not just about the cookie. There are so many ways now to match an audience or individuals within an audience that is qualified and interesting to a client, and to be able to deliver that information at the right time, right place.
Yeah, it's all those cookies that have led to my need for now this lower cholesterol diet messaging that I'm getting from Jay all the time. Aaron, we're on to healthcare now again. So what are your thoughts on this, about this targeting work, right? Aaron, I'm not sure if you're on mute.
I'm sorry, what was missed the question?
Yeah. What Brian's talking about, getting this targeted, Brian and Jay, about getting this targeted messages out there in the right place, in the right tone, and when your target customers are looking to hear it, right? I mean, you're interacting with your customers on such an intimate level sometimes, right? In that healthcare industry. How are you experiencing this as well?
Yeah, I mean, the same way in what Brian was just talking about, and I'd say we're a bit further along on is, we have been using first party precision based targeting more so than cookie based targeting anyway. And so because, we're farther along, one of the things that we've already built and is the CVS Media Exchange, right? So you're going to start to see this proliferation of these types of platforms where the retailer or the bank or whomever it is that has the first party data and can provide both the access and targeting, but again, contextual relevance are going to do well. And then the third piece is measurement, right? And I see a question in the chat about that. And so we're seeing more and more deep partnerships. The old publisher marketer relationship is becoming tight again. So as an example, with a healthcare supplier that we work with, we're able to do real co-branded marketing efforts and say, okay, this is the consumer need, the consumer job to be done. Maybe it's manage my allergies, right? And we know who that buyer is. And the brand, the supplier partner, has really actionable, great solutions, both product and content. And we can put that in front of the consumer in the relevant, contextually relevant way and measure success of that. So you're going to start to see more and more of that. And then the challenge for everybody is going to be, how do you compare those things across?
Right. And, I think also something that I read from Jason's question here as well is that when you have that information that you can leverage to help your customers, it's a possession of yours, right? It's not this, metadata. It's not this huge conglomeration of all like your ideal customer profiles necessarily. It's me. You've got information about me, so you can target me. Jeff, I see you nodding along there as well. And I know that Microsoft, has been going through a lot of changes. Already we see the pivot going from Explorer to Edge and so forth. And you're leveraging this new, again, zeitgeist about people's comfort level with giving that information to a brand. Tell us more about what you're doing there at Microsoft.
Yeah, well, thanks, Steve. We're doing a lot. I think there's a lot of different divisions at Microsoft. There's unification, though, around these principles that we've been talking about. We think an important investment area right now in the open web is our browser. And so Edge is our browser. What we're trying to do with Edge, we've actually gone forward with ETP, which is like Safari's ITP. It's a functional capability within the browser that by default protects consumer identity. We think differential privacy in the browser is super important. We think that eventually Chrome will get there, and they're an important browser, obviously, from a market share perspective. But they're also doing things with Privacy Sandbox that we think we need to push back against. And so, not to throw Google under the bus, they've done a ton of great things for the ecosystem, but they've also done a lot of value creation for themselves, and we want to keep value creation open for everybody, right? And so when we think of Flock and Fledge and some of these capabilities where Google wants to take all of that and put that into the browser and control via pulling data into the browser, we think they've gone a little bit too far. And so we have a proposal called Parakeet. It's live on GitHub, so please shout out to anybody with engineering teams that want to contribute to that. We'd love feedback and participation. But we believe it's super important for publishers and marketers to be able to leverage core payloads and technologies like Brian's native DSP to be able to continue to bring data themselves and to control that data and have autonomy of that data on their platforms of record, not just giving it wholesale to the Privacy Sandbox for one entity to have access to. We want to have decisioning, we want to have auctions occurring in all browsers. We think open web is going to continue to thrive and innovation is going to occur if we can drive those standards. So that's one big effort that we have, the Parakeet initiative. And as Google pauses and takes feedback. We think this is a really important time for everyone to speak up, to make voices heard, to comment, to speak to the W3C, which is really the largest decisioning body that's impacting all of us in the open web. But we think that's super important. And to everything that Aaron has talked about and where Jay's headed, that one-to-one, we also have a big commercial investment in CDP. And we see the CDP as being such a key utility and platform for marketers, where they need to own consent, where they need to own control, where they can leverage all of their data in proprietary ways with total safety and security. So we have huge investments. That's on the other side of the world for me and Microsoft in Dynamics. But we see those as two important pillars for our future.
Awesome, Jeff. And you alluded to Jay, and I'm going to go over there, Jay, because I saw you kind of part furrowed brow, part nodding along there. And I was just wondering, from your perspective, and I'm going to give you more credit than, or not more credit than is due, but give you the full credit where it's due. It's not like you're just, hey, now General Mills has a website. Obviously, you're not that nascent into it, but it's not as traditional of a platform, and so these tools, they're new to you, they're new to everybody. What are your thoughts? And I think I want to roll that into also the question that's coming in here about split communication, ads between online, retail, DTC channels. I mean, how does what Jeff was just talking relate to a marketing organization like you have at General Mills?
I think what Jeff hit on really, really well was where I was trying to go with the example of the kind of shipping product. The support behind what we are trying to do is immense now. And he talked about the CDP, and he talked about a little bit of how we would organize and really get a unified look at a consumer. And there's so many different acronyms that I never really wanted to know about until I got into this space about, even DSPs, but PIM systems and CSPs and DAMs. And it's like, holy crap, as a marketer, I grew up in the brand management side. I assume when I hit the enter button, it happens, right? I don't really worry about that backbone. And I will tell you, you talked about General Mills in our infancy. We had built our tech stack on the back of whatever best solution was for that particular ask, whether it's a email solution or it's a app solution or it's a customer relationship management solution. It was built on, okay, we have that very niche need. Let's go figure that out. And we did a realization about 6-8 months ago that none of this stuff talks to each other. And so I don't have a unified look at a consumer. My BettyCrocker.com has their database of people. My BoxTops system has a different set of people, and they're not unified. So I don't know if I'm sending them the same message, 12 messages, whatever. And so it is really getting after a good understanding of all that goes into it. And Jeff hit on one other thing that we also need to make sure we're thinking about is consent management. Now, how do I know what person has given me what permission to do what with their information when we're a huge portfolio of brands trying to talk across them? I have some consumers that will let me send their information to the Betty team versus the Pillsbury team. Others will not. And so how do you manage all of that is candidly making my head explode, but it is very much the role that we are starting to play. And this is back to the central resources need to be much more focused on figuring those solutions out in order for us to actually do the marketing that we want.
Yeah, there's probably an acronym that'll help you with that, Jay, I imagine, right? Brian, you're kind of chuckling along there. It sounds like Jay's singing your tune here, right? Tell us more about StackAdapt's approach to helping solve these complicated problems like that.
Well, I think we and other platforms have expanded across a variety of channels. We wouldn't do the job of all the internal mechanisms that any large brand like General Mills manages, or even Aaron at CVS or Jeff at Microsoft. But we're bringing not just native and display, but also connected television and audio as everything becomes digital, and managing sort of a level of consistency across those channels so that your campaign is placed based on either behavioral or contextual capabilities to a target that you have crisply and clearly defined. And even though we don't manage permission, we don't collect data, we're respecting all of those decisions that you've made and trying to make sure that a consistently great experience gets delivered to either customers or prospects, whoever you're targeting.
Yeah.
And so the platform expansion, I think, is a good thing because it brings more things into a digital world, more measurable, of course, and solves a big part of that problem for major brands.
Yeah, Aaron, it looked like maybe you had something to say, but I have a question for you too.
Yeah.
Will you go ahead first? Yeah.
More of a comment and a question actually for ourselves. Based on what Jay and Jeff were saying, one of the things that we wrestle with is, we have our CDP, right? And so data, it's great. Two challenges, you also need the governance, right? Jay, you talked about like making sure that, not every business unit or every marketer is accessing that data without some level of governance and bombarding the customer. So that's one piece that, again, I think is going to continue to be art and science. But then the other piece that we started talking about at the beginning of the conversation that I think is really important and on my mind all the time is like, what is the skill set of today's marketer that's really needed? Because you're not going to get it in one person. It's going to be very unlikely. Like the person that is going to understand the depths of how the DSP technology works and also build the next breakthrough, messaging campaign. And so finding that right level of business analytical marketers that know enough to be dangerous and ask the right questions, because in a highly regulated environment, at the end of the day, the marketer needs to be understanding more. How am I really reaching that customer? I'm not just throwing that over to the agency or whomever else and trusting that everything is working, exactly as I intend in my mind. And so, I'm curious to get the group's thoughts on how you're building the skill sets of those marketers and striking that balance of knowing enough to be dangerous, but not sneeze.
I think it's a great question for Jeff, kind of being on the cusp with marketing and tech there at Microsoft. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a great question, Zia and Aaron. I think the way we think about it is you're probably not going to find a lot of unicorns out there as you sort of frame those up. And so we really need to create tight synergies between sort of the legal, the regulatory, the business, the tech, and the marketing, right? So that synergy really needs to occur like operationally within our organizations. But then to kind of what Jay brought up earlier, it also needs to happen across all of your line of business applications. And so we're uniquely focused with Azure, our cloud, not to make this a commercial, sorry, I hate to do that, but we're focused with our cloud.
You already crapped all over Google, so go right ahead.
I know, and I really do love Google. I just, for the record, I have to be honest, but so we think we have a really differentiated position because the governance that Aaron referred to, it needs to come in and it needs to understand the data that is being transacted upon. And then to Jay's point, n number of brands within large companies, n number of use cases. The governance needs to follow that data and be intelligent across those line of business applications, right? Whether it's the CDP and driving consent to use from a marketing or a publishing or media perspective, or whether it's product or finance, all of that data needs to have metadata associated to it that's tied directly to governance, and it needs to reflect each of the governing bodies and sovereign nations that data occurs in. If it's sort of TRIMS compliant, it needs to be in the market on the cloud in the actual country of origin. So there's so much complexity, and I think the unicorn capability, it doesn't scale, and so it's about it's connecting the infrastructure. The cloud, the line of business applications we see as super, super fundamental structurally. But then I don't think there's any other way to have great marketers that also understand everything else and all the complexity. It's bringing those synergies together and keeping those teams, as interwoven as possible.
Yeah. So Jeff's prescription is you definitely need marketers who know everything, but give it up because you'll never find it, right? Jay,
I'd like
go ahead, Brian.
Jump in on that. Aaron and I didn't coordinate this, but there is a very dramatic labor shortage that we're fighting in North America, it seems. And one of the things that we determined was maybe a hole in the market, and it sounds like it's bearing out. And in fact, in the first poll about a third of the audience that took the poll hadn't heard of programmatic really. We launched a programmatic course designed to educate. It has no commerce equation involved. It's free to anyone who wants to take it to become certified as a digital programmatic expert. And then we have another course, a more advanced course just for our clients who are on our platform to become certified in our platform. So we're digging in, and right now we've been getting, I think we're into the thousands now across the two who we have now certified so that we can bring that skill level up. You know, it's a big challenge, but everybody's got to do their part.
Brian, I love that story because it's such a great dramatization of the concept of sharing information. You had alluded to it earlier, that your marketing can also be helpful and valuable in and of itself, the message and the information that you're sharing with it. There's the criticism about free milk and cows, right? But then you look at I think the apocryphal example is the local plumber who puts up how-to videos up on YouTube and explains how to do the job so that you don't have to hire him in. And people are like, "Oh, that's so crazy. You shouldn't be doing that," right? But that guy is understanding, and I come at it from a CX perspective, right? And CX and marketing are opposite sides of the same coin, all having to do with that brand promise and delivering value on behalf of the brand. And isn't that kind of more wedded to the whole purpose that we're all here in business in the first place?
If we all collectively do our job well, the particular individual that we're targeting gets helpful, useful information at the time they need it, not an ad that blares at them about something they're not even remotely interested in.
Yeah, buy.
Right. And the state of the art has been to collect this anonymous information to be able, from a cookie or some other behavioral mechanism, to be able to deliver it. We're seeing that the contextual approach in a lot of our use cases, about a third of our use cases, contextual is better performance than retargeting. So even people that have been to the site and been cookied, we can do a better job of delivering performance if we get the right context, get the right message in the right place.
Yeah, fascinating if what you're trying to do is serve your customers. What a great Northern Star and guiding light that is.
Yeah.
Jay, we're kind of beating up on you a little bit here. So I want to come back and hear your thoughts on that as well. I mean, being so brand new to this whole world, right, Jay, over there at GM, tell us your thoughts on this so far that you're hearing from Jeff and Aaron as well.
Yeah. On the talent piece, it's a great call out. I'll make two comments. And we have a huge organization, so marketing means a whole lot of different things in our world. But it's not just what we would define as marketing, but it's our market intelligence group. Those, gone are the days of focus groups and qualitative surveys, and it is much more data science than it is that type of ethnography, right? And so how that's a whole nother skill set that is not there. But the other comment I would make is the biggest problems that we have are not in the doers and not in the associate brand managers. It's candidly the veterans like me that are 21 years in this business and have gotten where we are doing something very, very different. It's our executives that don't really follow what the specific tech needs are in order for us to market on a personalized way. We still call it digital marketing. Right? It's not really a thing anymore. I mean, that's marketing, right? And so how do we really move that organization there? And I don't know who is all on this audience. It's either going to be really empathetic to you and you're kind of leaders that aren't quite there with you, or it's the leaders and hopefully you kind of hear a message. But it has been a good learning journey for us that it's more of that director plus level for our organization that we really are trying to embed a different skill set in how they coach, train, and lead a team in this space. Because candidly, the 25-year-olds that they got doing their work know what the hell they're talking about. And so how do we lean into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So Jay, if I could distill your message, it's these kids with their damned internet now. That's the problem. Is that it?
No, it's the solution, Z. That's not the problem.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to go outside and bark at some clouds as soon as we're done here. But Jay, actually, that tees us up for a great exit question. I want to kind of go around the horn and get everybody's thought on this as we wrap up before we get the hook. So I'm gonna thank each of you for joining us and introduce you each in turn. So Aaron Condon is the Vice President of Front Store and Omnichannel Marketing, CVS Health. Exit question to you. what is the biggest challenge? And I'm not even going to narrow it down, just marketing and what we've been talking about here this entire hour. What's the biggest challenge of the future, current/future, and what do you think some of the possible approaches are?
Well, I'll cheat and give two, because I do think this building the digital acumen of the entire organization is something that we're all challenged by, because you can't just build it within the marketing teams or the IT teams or the digital teams. It has to persist throughout the organization. And then the other thing I would say is, I think we'll see more and more, what I refer to as frenemy type relationships in marketing, right? And this, like, gosh, I want to partner with this person, but nobody wants to give up any information. And we have these relationships that we need and want. In a specific example in our world is, the marketplace partners like the DoorDashes and Instacarts of the world, right? That's our customer, their platform, right? And so how do we leverage those partnerships for good, but in a way that protects the best interest of our customer at all times is something that's on my mind.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Erin. Partnering with other service providers in different industries, that all affects your brand, Yeah, so that's tricky. I mean, just ask Jeff Nienaber, who is the Senior Director Global Audience for ADS at Microsoft, to heck with Google, obviously, but what do you see as the greatest challenge coming up? And then what do you think about how to overcome it?
Well, yeah, thanks, Z. And you got my name right. That's amazing. Thank you. So I mean, I think Erin definitely hit on it. I think, the reality of needing unicorns, like the pace of change and innovation is going to continue to accelerate. And that's legally, that's technically, that's strategically, like all of the distribution, all of the data, it's only increasing. And so, be a learner. I think something I learned very early in my career at a cataloger is just simple test and measure, right? So I think, we lose a lot of that with third-party cookies going away and mobile ad IDs going away. It's harder. Brian, teed up several good solutions and workarounds. You can still use contextual. You can still use a lot of tools, but test and measure and learn and experiment to figure out how these changes are opportunities for you to benefit. So I think, fundamentals of marketing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Stay curious, my friend, as always. That's the answer to any of these. Jay Picanato is the Director of E-commerce for General Mills. Jay, what do you see as the biggest challenge coming up, and how are you going to tackle it?
Yeah.
Besides retiring and yelling.
I have the challenge. I don't know how the tackle part's coming, but one of the things I am anxious about is how to measure and optimize in a world that's unbelievably personalized. When you search yogurt at walmart.com and your screen looks 100% different than everybody else's screens because of your purchase behavior and your internet queries and how we are targeting you, I don't know how to track and then optimize performance for me, because I don't know what happened on your computer. And that's going to be an interesting challenge for us to roll around with and wrestle with, in terms of solution. I don't have one, but I do think it's going to be candidly not the General Millses that figure out. It's the Bryans that are going to figure that out for us and help us understand how we really can get to performance attribution and optimization in a world where it is unbelievable personalization. And see what I did there, Z, for you? I just made
I was just going to say, I was like, I don't know if I owe you a beer for that or Brian does, but that was perfectly well done. Thanks, Jay. Brian Birch, VP of Marketing at our host, StackAdapt. Brian, take it away.
So from our perspective, the complexity that we've all talked about, coupled with the challenge of developing the next wave of people and the skills required, I think that a lot of that challenge is met by increasing that relationship building, like Erin talked about, working with partners. I think it's driving clients and agencies back together. Having 30 years of perspective as a fairly large client at a bunch of big companies, I relied very heavily in most of those jobs on really talented agencies. And those agencies have remade themselves. I've remade myself I think that those relationships are getting tighter and tighter because agencies tend to have a commodity that's really hard for brands to find in terms of some of these highly technical people that have figured out how to put the key in the lock and take platforms like ours and other an arrayed set of MarTech and build campaigns that perform really highly. I would have never discovered StackAdapt if a great agency hadn't brought it to us and said, here's a fantastic way to solve your problem getting to this audience at the Cisco event. So I think we have to draw together. I think the expertise is in short supply. All of us are doing things to try to improve the knowledge. You know, we're using our academy to try to educate people on what programmatic can do, but we can't do it alone. Brands can't do it alone. Agencies can't do it alone. I think that's going to be the key, is, you know, sort of formalizing and tightening some of those relationships that have been pulled apart and examined over the last 10 years. And I think that's probably the key for a lot of brands, at least.
Fantastic, Brian. I couldn't have wrapped it up any better myself, and so I'm not going to try. Instead, just going to go back to Jazz. Jazz, Brian nailed it right at the top of the hour. I'm gonna hand it back to you.
He absolutely did. I mean,
Yeah.
He always does, to be fair. And Z, you did as well. That does wrap up today's webinar. And yeah, we covered a lot and everyone brought something unique, which is so fantastic when we have such a diverse panel. So thank you so much for joining us. And I think we're discovering a few more of these topics, or delving in a little bit deeper to a few more of these topics at Strategic Marketing 2021. Jay, Jeff, Erin, Brian, I want to extend a massive thank you to you all for lending us your time and expertise today. And of course, thank you to today's sponsor, StackAdapt, for working with us to create this important discussion. If you would like to check out what they have to offer and how it can benefit your business, please head over to www.stackadapt.com. Brian and the StackAdapt team put together such useful content on programmatic advertising and so much more, really. So if you would like to receive this and didn't opt in to hear from them and you'd like to, then you can just shoot me an email and I can connect you. And last but not least, I would like to thank you, you for joining us and joining the discussion. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for putting things in the chat. I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. But before you leave this call, one more thing I want to remind you about Strategic Marketing 2021. It's on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We start at 11 a.m. ET each day and run back-to-back panel discussions, interviews, fireside chats, and presentations, some of them which are moderated by Z, some by me. And from the world's most influential marketers, they will be there. They'll be on those panel discussions, sharing their insights and their 2022 strategies. So do not miss out on that. This is your last chance to claim a free pass. So check out StackAdapt, check out Strategic Marketing 2021. I'm Jasmine Keys, and I'll see you next time.